For more on the soaring tensions between Iran and the U.S., Behnam Ben Taleblu joins me now. He is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Behnam, thank you so much for being with us. First of all, what does Qassem Soleimani's death actually mean for stability in the region? And also, does his death now mean that there is an increased risk to American lives, both U.S. troops and diplomats who are serving in the region?
Well, great to be with you. Qassem Soleimani, the major general who commanded Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force, that's the country's elite extraterritorial foreign operations unit, was responsible for most of the instability we saw in the past decade and a half in the Middle East, whether it was Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. If there was a place where an American adversary was baiting and bleeding America, it was Qassem Soleimani who was driving that instability. But that instability is not at all over. Now the Iranians may want to respond. The question is how, when, and where will they respond? And will they be able to be as effective without their most important general at the helm?
What options are now available realistically to Iran? I mean, at this point, it would seem very unlikely that they'd return to the negotiating table.
I think the Iranians don't respond to little intermediate shows of strength. They respond to clear, demonstrated, sticky messages of strength. That it's not a political message, this is a genuine change in policy. You saw that with the end of the Iran-Iraq war, when they read accidents as shows of strength. That could be what is needed here to get the Iranians to change their behavior. The Iranians are in a box, actually, especially with the recent tweet thread by President Trump. The Iranians have to respond such that they look like they're not absorbing American retaliation, but not so much so that they invite further military reprisal and even ruin for the regime. So the Iranians are really in a tough spot. You even saw a member of the parliament saying recently, we want revenge, not a war. So the Iranians are afraid of a full-scale war.
So what could that retaliation realistically look like? You were telling me off camera, perhaps some of what we saw in 2019.
Exactly. Past is going to be prologue here. The reason, the only thing that triggered a military response in 2019 from the Americans against the Iranians or an Iran-backed force was the killing of an American, was that the U.S. had such a high red line for the use of force. But the death of Qassem Soleimani stands to change that. And the Iranians have to figure out now, well, what is the new red line for the American use of force? And that should incentivize them to do even less.
Right, just to remind people, so it was on December 27th, an American contractor, civilian contractor, was killed in Iraq, right? And then that's when we saw sort of this lead up. You saw the embassy protest orchestrated by the Iran-backed militia. And we then saw the action taken against General Soleimani, taking us to this point now.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
And so you don't think that there would be, or at least it would not be in Iranian interest if they're kind of following the logic of what they've seen the U.S. do so far, would not be in Iran's interest to go after American lives in the same way? That's
right. And now the real question is, American lives have been responded to with the use of military force. The real question is there a lower red line for American interests, assets, or allied security? So if you're a U.S. partner or ally, I too would be concerned. Israel, Saudi Arabia, the GCC states should step up their security, because the Iranians are going to be looking at trying to divide America from some of its regional partners. America might respond and defend its own interests, but what about those of its regional partners?
So, yeah, how is Iran likely to interpret the president's latest tweet, where he talked about specifically targeting, if there's Iranian retaliation, 52 sites?
Well, 52, the president explained this, had this interesting explanation, where it's 52 because of the 52 hostages that were taken in 1979, sparking the 444-day hostage crisis and really the divorce of America and Iran, because they were really much closer partners during the Cold War. The Iranians, I think, are still gaming it out. For a while, the Iranians were trying to prove that the president was the opposite of Teddy Roosevelt. You know the famous saying, speak softly and carry a big stick? That President Trump was speaking loudly and carrying no stick. But now they saw a response that, unlike anything they've seen in the past 4 decades from any president, Democrat or Republican, and that has to affect their national security calculus. And today is the last day of mourning in Iran for Qassem Soleimani. It was a 3-day public mourning, and now they're going to begin to respond. The question again is where, when, and how.
So how much of an influence does Iran actually have in Baghdad? As we've been reporting, we had that action taken by the Iranian parliament to go ahead and pass a resolution to essentially kick out the American forces who are there now. But it's a non-binding resolution.
That's right. Every time there's been a major crisis or inflection point in Iraq, pro-Iran-backed Shia militias, which have a certain constituency in Iraq's parliament and are more beholden to Tehran than to Baghdad, have used the crisis to try to introduce a resolution to evict America from Iraq. And make no mistake, one of Iran's key regional goals is to kick America out of Iraq. Now that the resolution is passed, admittedly, the Sunnis and the Kurds, who would be more supportive of an American position there, did not show up for the vote. So now that such a non-binding resolution is passed, America is going to have to navigate Iraqi domestic politics as much as it's going to have to navigate Iranian regional security decision-making. So Iranian influence might even still be high, even with the death of Soleimani.
So help us understand some context here. Soleimani was one of the most powerful figures in Iran. How does the general public there actually view his death? Is it likely to sort of solidify Iranians behind the regime?
I don't think so. You know, the most recent protests we've seen, 2017, 2018, 2019, are the more blue-collar protests that begin on the periphery of Iran and then move towards the center. Very different from 1999 or 2009, where it was Tehran only. And these guys were the people that the revolution was made for. But they are the ones on the streets now, chastising the mullahs and the Revolutionary Guard for their revolutionary foreign policy. You have a real crisis in Iran where you have a revolutionary government and a post-revolutionary society. And the money that should have been spent at home was spent on Qassem Soleimani's Quds Force and its myriad regional proxies and partners. So while there have been some flashpoints in Kerman and in Tehran supportive of Soleimani and wanting to make a show of force, this is a very, very, very small sector of the public, in my view, that is more reliant on the government or tied to the government. The vast majority of Iranians, I think, are happy to see this guy gone. But the question is, where will the crisis with America go that affects not just Iranians, but the whole region?
All right, Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you so much, Behnam, for joining us.
Thank you.